Okay, we're live.
Oh.
Duran, live 36. How's everyone doing out there? If you can hear me, let me know. If you can hear me in the chat, let me know if the sound is good. Let me know if the audio is coming through okay. How's everyone doing out there? Spring is here. All right, let's see who's listening to us. From where people are tuning in from. Let's see, we have got Switzerland, Wisconsin. All right, good audio, thank you. Good audio, Valies, thank you. From India, from Northridge. All right, great. Texas, Holland. All right, let's get rolling. We have in Moscow, the man, the myth, host of RT's Crosstalk, Mr. Peter Lavelle. Peter, how are you doing this Monday afternoon?
I'm officially on vacation from work. We have 4 weeks of vacation a year. So my team, not me, my team decided that we would take a week now, and in August we'll take 3 weeks. So I am working on my new apartment mostly and keeping up with the news, okay? And doing this, of course, which I'm thrilled to do as usual. So everything's fine.
All right, everything is good. And we have in London, the Oracle of London, Mr. Alexander Mercouris. Alexander, what's up, Diganis? How you doing?
I'm very well. It's Easter Monday for me because, of course, I celebrate the Orthodox Easter, and we've had a very good Easter. We went to the Orthodox Church in London, which was built in the 1870s with a large donation given by my great-great-grandfather on my mother's side. So it's in a way a sense of family church for us. But anyway, that's where I was, and obviously, like Peter, I keep up with the news.
I always feel like a peasant next to you, Alexander Mercouris. It's a peasant.
Oh, hardly that.
Peter. I could have been my ancestors were probably serfs working for you. Okay.
Oh, hardly that, Peter.
Right. Let's see. Hello from Copenhagen, from Mauritius. How you doing? Cool. All right. From Italy. Okay, Calgary. Man, I saw a video. Calgary was like snowing, like a snowstorm in April. It's crazy.
It's like Trudeau weather, yeah.
Yeah. Trudeau weather, yeah.
Freaky stuff.
And we have a super chat from Valley. Yes, thank you, Valley, for that super chat. Let's get rolling. Peter, post Mueller, post Russia hoax, how is Trump going to govern, you think, going forward? He's got about 2 years before the elections. He's got Bolton and Pompeo pushing the foreign policy levers. How do you think Trump's going to take this?
Well, I think Steve Bannon put it perfectly. He's going to go complete animal on his opposition. And the Democrats are putting up their menu of characters. I mean, Trump is salivating over this, really. I mean, with Joe Biden, they decided to run Hillary Clinton again. Wow, these guys are so smart, aren't they? I mean, no one in the crowd has any gravitas whatsoever. So I think, what Trump needs to do, and I'm hoping, is that he's not going to start any new wars. I think he's given Pompeo and Bolton the go-ahead to go up to, but not to, a war, okay? Because that would be very serious. It would be easy to use it against him in 2020. How is he going to govern between now and then? Like he's governed the first 2 years. Not much is going to get done. Actually, Donald Trump is very disparaging of Barack Obama. At every chance he gets, he wants to disparage the legacy of Barack Obama. But Trump is governing exactly like Barack Obama. Executive order. I mean, not much is getting done. Not much at all. And that's the fault of the Democrats, okay? Because they don't want to engage on topics and issues that there is a common sense consensus, I mean, infrastructure, things like that. I think have a serious conversation about immigration. No, but then the Democrats are using that as a political cudgel, which is damaging the country really very badly. So how is he going to govern? Like the first 2 years, not much gets done.
Alexander, what's your take on this? How do you think Trump's going to go forward in the next year and a half, 2 years before 2020?
I think Peter summed it up very well. I just say two things. Firstly, he doesn't have 2 years. He's got one and a half years. The election is in November 2020, and we're now at the end of April. And of course, the election season is already up and running. That's one of the things, by the way, that we in Europe, in Britain especially, find very difficult to understand, that the election cycles in the US are so long, and the actual government cycles, the periods of time when there isn't some kind of electioneering going on, seem to be very, very, very short. But Peter's absolutely right. I think, like Peter, that if Donald Trump wants to win this election, he's got to do two things. Firstly, he's got to attack the Democrats and attack them hard. They held the country hostage for 2 years, actually more than 2 years, on this ridiculous hoax. They've done some terrible things along the way. They've got to be brought to account for that.
Attack them hard how, Alexander, before you proceed? How attack them hard?
Point out, firstly, the massive illegalities, and I'm going to use the word frankly, corruption that was involved in that whole process, a corruption that extended to the Democrats, the various institutions of power, the intelligence agencies, and which, of course, involved the media. The media is relentlessly hostile to Donald Trump. He's now got to go on the attack against the media. They've given him all the reasons why he should. Because let's be absolutely clear about this. This is not a free speech issue. This is a question of gross media abuse in order to achieve a partisan objective, which is to remove Donald Trump unconstitutionally from the presidency. So he's got to publish all the FISA warrants. He's got to declassify all the information that he can. He's got to refuse to take notes.
And he will. And he will.
Yeah, and I think he will. At the same time, he's also got to do what Peter said. He's got to govern. He's got to actually do some serious governing. Now, he did some important things with the economy at the beginning with his tax changes, but everything else seems to be at the moment paralyzed. And he's got to point out again that it is Congress, or to be more precise, the Democrats in the House, that are making the government of the United States impossible. That is what Harry Truman did in the 52 election. Or was it 50 election? Peter 48 election. 48 election. He ran against the do-nothing Republican Congress, as it then was. What we now have is a do-nothing Democrats House of Representatives, except of course they're not doing nothing. They're again trying to attack Donald Trump, putting their partisan interests before the national interests. I think Donald Trump has all the things to play for. I think the economy will remain at least good until the 2020 election.
Yeah, buoyant. Yeah.
Buoyant. And I think also he's got, as Peter correctly says, a disastrously bad list of candidates against him. I have to say, Joe Biden, I mean, really.
Can I say something on Biden real quick, and you can continue, Alex? Just very quickly. One thing that strikes me really odd about Biden and how the media has depicted it is that they focused, like with the whole creepy thing when he was touching and smelling the hair, they focused only on the part that he was doing it with grown women. No one ever touched the fact that he was doing the same thing with children. Did you guys notice that? I think Paul Joseph Watson also pointed it out, and he did a video on it where he was like saying, it's really funny how the media is just focusing in on the fact that, Creepy Joe is just, groping women, but no one's even approaching the fact that he was doing the same thing to little children. I just thought that was interesting. I throw that out there. Of course, I'm interested to see what people in the chat are going to say.
I personally, I thought it was beneath everyone's dignity to put so much attention on Creepy Joe. Okay, the thing is that we've all known it for a long time. Okay, but I would like to know is that he was in the Oval Office. Apparently he was very close with Barack Obama. How much did he know about the origins of this Russiagate hoax? Okay, and also a lot of his business dealings, with Ukraine, with China. See, everybody takes the oxygen out of the air because he's a touchy-feely, creepy guy, which he is. Okay, but what about the things he's done and enriched himself? That's the only thing he's ever done in life. And he's very, very wealthy. I'd like to know more about that. See, this is where Fox gets it wrong. You know, this is where Hannity and Laura get it wrong. Tucker went down that path, and then the next day he reversed himself because it's not about policy, okay? So I would like to see more talk about that kind of thing. And of course, Trump, he has this is a gift on a silver platter. It's called Pelosi AOC. He's going to work that negative dynamic to its very, very core. And with the hoax at his back, he has a backwind to him, or a wind to his back, and now he has AOC and Pelosi. Those are two things he's going to really play. You remember I said a few weeks ago is that he's going to play this socialism thing, okay? He's going to play this thing against the Democrats. Politically speaking, he's got a really good trajectory right now, okay? Yeah. Of course, our critical concerns here, you know, in light of, you know, the bashing we took from a viewer a few days ago, is that I'm very worried about a neocon foreign policy is being unleashed, okay? And that is a weak spot for Trump if he doesn't keep an eye on it. And I worry very, very much about that.
Alexander?
No, I agree with what Peter says about Joe Biden. I mean, I would point out that, of course, if it'd been a Republican candidate who had been accused of those things, I mean, he would have been annihilated. I mean, he would not be standing. But of course, with Joe Biden, you know, you give him the free pass on this. But fundamentally, I agree with Peter that it's the policies and the what the man stands for, what he's done, that are the question. And there are lots of questions. I mean, we've done programs about Joe Biden and Hunter Biden, his son, and their role in Ukraine, and what part they played in the coup in Ukraine, and all those things. I would add, by the way, that he was also heavily involved in, or appears to have been heavily involved in, the decisions to launch the war in the Donbass. Which went so disastrously.
It was his mandate. Ukraine was his
go
mandate.
Into that, guys. I think that's really critical for us to discuss that, his role in Ukraine and him launching the war.
I mean, I'll say quickly this, and then over to Peter. But I mean, I can remember that in the run-up to the Maidan coup, he was on the phone all the time to Yanukovych, basically telling
Attaboy, attaboy.
Yeah.
Victoria Nuland's words.
Absolutely.
He said to Jeffrey Piat, have Biden give him an attaboy telephone call the day before the coup.
Exactly. And then when the coup happened, I mean, he came in and he was absolutely supportive of it. And it was quite clear to me that he was the person in Washington who was running the show in terms of US policy in Ukraine. And of course, we now know that through his son, he had a financial interest in what was going on. But I can also remember, I think Peter may remember this better, but I sort of remember that he actually came over to Ukraine. This is in the early months
that picture?
As the Donbass crisis was starting to get worse. But at a time when the people in the Donbass were not talking about fighting, they were talking about, we want to talk, we want to negotiate, we want decentralization, we want to federalize. And in fact, what happened was that Biden, and I think he actually came to Kiev, and he met with all those people, and he basically either green-lighted, or perhaps even more likely, he encouraged the Ukrainians to use force to smash resistance in the Donbass. And of course, we now know that he actually had a stake through his son in the outcome of that war. So, I mean, a very, very shady and very, very troubling history. Peter perhaps has a more complete recollection of this than I do, but, you know, it's something maybe we should research and look into.
No, you're spot on. I agree with you completely. I just think of that iconic picture of Trump speaking to the coup government, and he was sitting at the head of the table like
that's right. Biden,
yeah. And I remember putting that on Facebook. I mean, and it was so patently clear who was running the show there.
Absolutely.
So those are the, you know, I really want to stay away from this optic stuff. I mean, I think in our last talk, you know, for me, it's like the third level of analysis, because optics are important, but let's not go there first, okay? Because that gives him a pass, because the Democrats are always going to give their own a pass, all right? So we'll see how the Democrats deal with it. I think the Republicans, Trump should kind of just stay away from that. I mean, when you watch your opponents in a circular firing squad, don't get in the way. Just watch.
Well, Hannity had a telephone call with Trump, and I think it was the first call, actually, the first time Trump talked to a mainstream media outlet after the Mueller decision, after the Mueller report was completed. And Hannity did bring up Ukraine. And Trump also said that he's aware of what was going on. He's going to leave it up to AG Barr to dig into it. What do you guys make of it? That's the first time that Ukraine was thrown out there. Look, and Trump said, yeah, I know.
But, those of us that have honestly looked at this hoax from the very, very beginning, and I want to give a kudos out to Robert Perry. Unfortunately, he passed recently, but he was digging deep into that, the connections between the DNC and the corrupt government in Ukraine, looking for dirt on anyone was in Trump's orbit, and they found it. They have it. They want to give it to the U.S. Justice Department, and I'm sure they're getting it if they haven't gotten it already. I think this will be the year of William Barr. Okay, because he's soft-spoken, but he's a straight shooter. And I think he sent a shiver down the spine of a lot of people during his last appearance testifying in front of Congress. When he said spying, it was like a neutron bomb went off. And even one of the Democrats before the hearing ended said, Attorney General Barr, do you want to amend your statement about spying? And he said, well, that's what it was. And he said, well, how about surveillance? He said, call it surveillance if you want. Okay, it was spying. Okay, so this tells me, because I remember, Alex, you had a very somber view of the future, but after that congressional hearing, I have a very strong belief now that not just Barr's going to go into it. We have an internal process going on at the FBI and the DOJ. And others. Okay, so we have more to go, and now it's going to be reverse. So for the last 2 years, it was drip from Rachel Maddow. Well, now the tables are turned. Now it's going to start being, okay, Joe DeGenova, which is a very smart guy, really, and he's the same. And criminal indictments are coming. Jared, what's his name? The legal analyst over at Craig Jared. He says criminal indictments are coming. Sarah Carter has her ear to the ground all the time. We're going to see grand juries. We're going to see the whole thing, but in reverse, and the truth, or hopefully the truth, will come out.
Alexander, what do you make of that? Like Peter said, you have Sarah Carter, you have Jarrett, you have John Solomon, you have Peter Schweitzer, who wrote Clinton Cash. You have all these people
Kimberly
now who are digging
Strassel,
around it. What the DNC did, what the Democrats did, what Biden did in Ukraine. Some people who are wondering in the chat, they're asking what was going on with Biden in Ukraine and Burisma. You might want to get into that a little bit as well. And, kind of talk about whether Barr does have a lot of stuff to pin on the Democrats, on the DNC, and real collusion that was going on.
Absolutely.
Not the fake hoax stuff. The Rachel Maddow stuff that Aaron Mate through about like 10 tweets, absolutely destroyed.
That was brutal.
That was
totally brutal. That was total Trump animal.
We're not talking, Rachel Maddow's, fear-mongering propaganda. We're talking real stuff. Go ahead, Alexander.
Let's start with Barr, because actually what Peter said about him using the word spy. Now, the thing to remember about Barr is he's an attorney general, obviously, of the United States. He is also, and I've said this many times, and I repeat it again, an exceptional lawyer. We're talking about somebody who is at the absolute top of the legal tree in the United States. I understand some people don't agree with his political views. No one who knows about law has any doubt at all about his legal skills. And of course, he has been Attorney General of the United States before. He has experience of these things. A person like that does not use a word like spy accidentally. He knows exactly what he's saying. So when Peter said that there was a shiver of fear across the room, that was the intention of what he said. He knew exactly what he was doing. And the Democrats in that room, some of them are lawyers, let's remember, also know it. And as for the indictments which are coming, I think it is been well trailed that Horowitz, who is the Inspector General of the FBI, of whom all the indications are that he is a straight and decent man who takes his job very seriously, unlike Mueller, is going to recommend criminal indictments in connection with the Russiagate investigation. So I think I will be very surprised if we don't see criminal indictments coming very soon. Now, I'm going to add one other thing, which is, I don't think I mentioned this before, but I have been wondering for a long time, what was the cause of all this hysterical reaction to Donald Trump? Obviously, the Democrats were angry because Hillary Clinton didn't win. Obviously, the Democrats were angry because this was an outsider who beat a bunch of professionals. But there has been a degree of hysteria and panic and anger about Donald Trump winning the presidency, which I have always found very disproportionate to anything that Donald Trump has said or done. I cannot help but think that the reason is because there are some extremely ugly things left over from the Obama years that the Democrats don't want to have investigated. And I'm going to make a pretty shrewd guess that they focus on Ukraine. As I said, Hunter Biden, who is Joe Biden's son, is a member of Ukrainian companies which are involved in exploiting Ukraine's oil wealth.
Burisma Holdings, which is located in Limassol, Cyprus.
Exactly. So we've already got that connection. We've got this extraordinary way in which IMF loans have been railroaded through to Ukraine, breaching the IMF's own rules.
But not to Greece.
And in the breach of the IMF's own rules. We've had indications, which oddly enough came out through the Manafort case, of how money flows backwards and forwards from the United States. It goes through the IMF to Ukraine and then comes swirling back, and it seems to be arriving in all sorts of pockets. We know the Podesta brothers were involved in some way in Ukraine. I have a suspicion that there is an awful lot more there than we actually yet know. And who knows, all sorts of ugly cans of worms may be lying around, and maybe they're not just cans of worms, maybe they're outright bombs. And who knows, if a proper investigation into all of this is carried out by a Justice Department and an FBI that are working properly for a change, we could find out all sorts of things that were going on that go far beyond the Russiagate hoax itself. So we shall see.
Oh, yeah, no doubt about it, Alexander. No doubt about it, Peter. I think if they really dug into it and they dug into Burisma and what was going on, I mean, I've seen reports saying that Burisma wanted to frack the hell out of East Ukraine and they wanted everyone off the land. So that's another reason why they said they started the war, literally to displace people and to just frack and get to oil and energy. So, I mean, there's a lot of bodies buried. Absolutely. A lot of bodies buried in this scandal. Let's hope Barr does something. Yeah. Peter, let's shift gears. And there's a couple of super chats on Iran. But before we get to the super chats, let's talk about Iran. We did a live chat on Friday as to Bolton and Pompeo and how they're steering things with Iran. Let's get into it, Peter. What do you think's going on here? Do you think we're heading towards a conflict with Iran?
My reading of it is that Pompeo, he was asked directly if he thought war was on the horizon with Iran, and he said no, which doesn't, take it at face value. Okay, I mean, he is an admitted liar. He said that to a group of people while he describing his time at the CIA. I'm going to stick to my my crystal ball is that Trump has given them a lot of room. I mean, Trump would like to see regime change in Iran, of course, because that's what his donor base wants. Okay, that's what the Israelis want. That's what the Saudis want, and he seems to have the Israelis here and the Saudis here. Okay, so I think they're just going to keep ratcheting it up as much as possible when it comes to sanctions. The big gambit here, and Alexander McCurris and I talked about this on Crosstalk, is that how willing is the U.S. Willing to upend the oil markets of the world in its bid for regime change in Iran. And they may truly, truly regret what they're doing, because a lot of allies are being forced to look for oil elsewhere at a higher price. Europe has a regime of austerity. They can't afford a more expensive energy. You have countries like Japan and China that are very much dependent on foreign oil. They're going to look very badly at all of this, okay? They're willing to go along with the United States on a lot of things. But when it comes to hitting their own national interests and their own economy, that's when people are starting to take a second look. So this gambit, so bold and brash and dangerous, really could backfire. And we have, as I've said for 10 years on Crosstalk, we always have the law of unintended consequences. These people that make these decisions don't think it through. They just think that the enemy is going to just suddenly say, okay, I surrender. It never happens that way. And countries like Iran have the ability, and because they have the experience, to outmaneuver these things. So it's costly, it's painful, it's difficult, but regime change in Iran is not going to happen because of sanctions, okay? It's simply not. But then you get to this dilemma where, the Pompeos and the Boltons, they empty out their toolkit, and there's only one tool left, and that's a military strike. And it'll be up to Trump if he wants to go that far. My gut tells me he is all for shaking everything up. He loves how he's this a force of motion in the world, but then there are real consequences if you unleash these things, and the consequences will be dreadful for the Middle East and for the world beyond. So it's maximum pressure is what they like to say, and that's really very much in play. But it's not just against Iran, it's against so many other countries in the world. And this is a policy that is really, really going to be, I think people are going to really be angry with. Turkey, I don't think will cave into it. I think India is a wild card. China won't. Japan will, of course. So this is the thing that's in play, and I'm watching it very, very closely. In my mind, it is the biggest geopolitical story out there right now.
Alexander, let's do a super chat on this very topic. It's from Penguins fan. What will happen in Persian Gulf, and will Iran shut off the Strait of Hormuz and the U.S. seize Iran oil ships?
I think we discussed this, Peter and I, quite recently, perhaps on Crosstalk. I think that Iran would be prepared to close the Strait of Hormuz, but they will do it only as a last resort if there is a really, really, really big crisis. From Iran's point of view, that is, in effect, the nuclear option. So I think the Iranians would be prepared to do it, and I think they have the capability to do it. But if we get into that situation, we are looking at a crisis, the like of which we have not seen, I think, basically since the 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis. I mean, perhaps even bigger than that, actually. I mean, it would be simply enormous. But I don't think the Iranians are bluffing on that one. I think they will do it, and I think that the United States, I hope, understands that Iran would do it, and it understands that the capability to do it is there. As I understand it, I'm not a geographer, but I understand that the sea channel through the Strait of Hormuz is extremely narrow. It would not be very difficult to block. I mean, you can't apparently navigate through the whole of the water there because it becomes shallow. So you have to go through a very, very narrow lane. Iran definitely has the means to blockade it, and I'm sure they have the plans to do it if they feel they have to. I don't think that's their plan, but I think that the United States ought to be recognizant of the fact that plan does exist, that capability does exist also.
All right, Peter, let's do another super chat on Iran from Mark. What is Turkey's position with regards to Iranian sanctions? Will they be aligned with Iran despite the fact they support opposite sides in Syria? Thank you for all your efforts. Thank you, Mark, for your super chat. Peter, Turkey and Iran. You touched upon Turkey in your last response.
Iran and Turkey, they're very strange political bedfellows indeed. Okay, because they have opposing positions in Syria, but I think that both of them also see the American unipolar order at an end, and where we're going is unclear. But certainly we know what we've left as a result of the end of the Cold War too about right now, and. What brings them together is that they want to have options. And I think that's a very interesting thing. It's very interesting that even though they disagree on Syria, they sit down together. I mean, quite often, actually, Sochi and other venues in Kazakhstan as well. So they're both looking for ways of maneuver. Turkey is very much exploring its geopolitical future in the region, but because of the economy, and this is the biggest caveat and the biggest thorn in Erdogan's his side, is that he's going to have to essentially go to the IMF, and you know what that means. The U.S. is going to have a whole lot of pressure, and that's he's going to have to find that wiggle room, because at the end of the day, the economy, the lira, is really in very, very bad shape. The economy is very badly managed. It's a very corrupt economy as well. I agree. I read it a few days ago. Was it the 3 C's? What was it? Credit, corruption. I can't remember the first one. Cronyism, credit, and corruption. The 3 C's of the Turkish economy. I think also they Turkey and Iran, they see obviously the pressure that the U.S. is applying against both countries for different reasons, obviously. But these two countries are asserting their sovereignty, and that's what they have in common. And both countries are mature enough to agree when they agree, and then when they disagree, like the Russians do in disagreement, they say publicly we agree to disagree, but doesn't mean we can't work on other issues. So and plus Turkey is it's playing a role like in the Venezuelan situation by refining Venezuelan gold. I mean it really is kind of a niche position in the geopolitical order. NATO needs Turkey more than Turkey needs NATO. That's why Erdogan will play his gambit of manipulation and give and take. Everything is transactional. It's the bazaar. So it doesn't mean that he's always going to succeed. No, I've said many times on our podcast, Erdogan is a masterful tactician. He's not a very good strategist.
Alexander, yes.
Yeah, one other to Peter's very fine survey. One other thing that, of course, draws Turkey and Iran closer together is that, especially from the Turkish side, is that, of course, Iran very publicly and very forcefully backed Erdogan during the 2016 coup.
Yep.
I mean, it was backing him publicly whilst the attempted coup was underway. And the Iranians were in contact with the Turkish government, Erdogan's government, at a time when it was being attacked by helicopter gunships and bombers and all that kind of thing during the coup. So this has created also a very strong connection between the leaderships of those two countries, with Erdogan, of course, remembering very well that he was getting all that backing from Iran at a time when he was getting almost no backing at all, either from the United States or from his erstwhile European friends.
Interestingly enough, too, is that another thing, the commonality with Iran and Turkey is that they have a good relationship with Russia, and they cover each other's political diplomatic back, and that's very interesting gambit as well.
Alexander, can you address a little bit, Peter mentioned it a little bit, the Turkish economy?
Oh, yeah.
Yes, I mean this is a serious issue. I mean this is Erdogan's Achilles heel, because what Erdogan has been doing, it's so interesting actually to compare Erdogan with Putin, because they're always lumped together, and I always say to people they're actually completely different.
Thank you. Yes. Yes.
Erdogan has done the exact opposite of what, I mean, Putin runs a very careful, very methodical, fiscally conservative, monetarily conservative economic policy, aiming above all at stability, macroeconomic stability, building up reserves, all the things which we've talked about on our programs many times. What Erdogan has done, on the contrary, is he has gone for broke. He has sacrificed stability to achieving very, very high growth rates. Those growth rates were always unsustainable because they were based on very, very fast credit that had to be imported from abroad. The result was that the Turkish economy has major problems with very high budget deficits, very high trade deficits. It's depended very much on importing capital from various parts of the world, including Europe and the Gulf, and by the way, also Russia. And of course, at the same time as it's been going for broke in this way, by refusing to raise interest rates in a timely fashion, it has made those investors extremely unable to make proper returns, and it has also meant that growth has been very unbalanced, going into things like construction, going into things like consumption, rather than into the productive parts of the economy which Turkey needs, like industries and factories and those sort of things. So lots of things have been going wrong. And of course, also Erdogan, who made a lot of political capital at the beginning of his time as Turkey's leader by building up Turkish infrastructure, has built up infrastructure to an extraordinary degree without any real planning, and talking about cronyism, which is what Peter was talking about. He's made sure that many of the contracts for all this infrastructure, the bridges and the roads, which often go nowhere, and the railway links, which don't link up to anything, he's made sure that those
whole
are built
cities
by
that are
his
empty.
friends.
Whole cities that are empty. Yeah,
exactly. He goes to his friends and also to members of his family. So we have what is potentially a big economy in a country with a large population, many of whom are highly educated, many of whom are capable of working very well, a country with considerable resources, but it has been very badly managed for a long time. It is what happens to an economy when the president and his associates become obsessed with high growth rates at the expense of everything else, and at the same time fall into the trap of letting themselves become enriched on those high growth rates. All the chickens have now come home to roost. Erdogan has no real strategy to get out of the situation that he has created for himself and for Turkey. It's very clear to me, it's become very clear to me over the last year or so, that he doesn't really have much grasp of economics. He's brought in one of his relatives to act as a finance minister, who is apparently an equally inexperienced man, as ignorant of basic economics as Erdogan himself is. So it is a bleak picture. I don't think we are going to see a total collapse in Turkey. I don't think we're anywhere close to seeing a humanitarian crisis there, but hyperinflation is certainly possible, and a major recession, I think, is now inevitable. And with Turkey depending on imports of capital which are not coming, it's going to be very difficult to see how the books are going to be balanced, how companies are not going to go bust, how things are not going to look very bad in the next few years.
All right, Peter, what is going on in Venezuela? Things have quieted down, it seems.
things have quieted down. Yeah. Well, there's the shock and awe of random guy Guaido is gone. All right, and it's very interesting. I was listening to Max Blumenthal. I think everyone knows he went down there a few weeks ago, and he did some fabulous video stuff. It was really, really good. But the supporters of Guaido, they vehemently hate the Maduro government, but their willingness to do much about it other than show up for a half an hour in the center of town before they retire to their cafes again. I mean, they don't have the spirit. And that's why they have to. Substituting spirit is these machinations and these covert operations. Screwing around with the utility grid and stuff like that. I mean, that what it is it is just to irritate the populace to the point of exhaustion. There's a complete misreading of the Maduro government's backing, and it's in the good 30%. I mean, people just definitely say, I'm with this guy. Okay, then there's a third that it's more of a wait and see. They don't want to see a military intervention by any country. The supporters of Guaido, they don't like them because they're essentially complacent, far richer than the rest of the population. And then you have up to 10, 15, 20. I'll even throw it in 30% that want to see the government change. But there's nobody has the stomach for it. There's no burning fire. And as much as Elliot Abrams is, conniving to make the situation worse for the average Venezuelan, he doesn't understand. He's supposed to be the expert, the expert. But there are millions and millions of people that came out of poverty under Chavez. Millions. And they got educated. They got the vote. They see tough times. Yeah, but you know what? They know what tough times are. That's not a mystery to them. This is not alien to them. And they have much more fire in their stomach. And they're going to stay with this government. And the key factor of all of this is that the military isn't going to flip. Okay? Elliot, if you're watching, it's not going to flip. And it never was going to flip. All right? So at the end of last week, there was a bit of a panic news about the impending takeover, the American takeover of the Venezuelan embassy in Washington. I think those were real concerns. I'm not putting it out of play that could happen because people like Elliot Abrams, he's a kiss up, spit down guy like Bolton, and he promised results, and so he's got his whole whiteboard of where he's going on all of this, and that's one of them. I wonder when we're going to get that.
Explain that a bit, Peter, as to what you're talking about with the embassy in Washington. Give some backstory. The critics of the Venezuelan government are saying that the people in the Venezuelan embassy in Washington, D.C. do not represent the legal government of Venezuela. Okay, and this is their view. They say that the rightful president is random guy Guaido, and that they have no legitimacy, which of course is complete nonsense. That is sovereign territory of Venezuela, and it is untouchable. Okay, untouchable, and any infringement upon the sovereignty of that physical unit would be a gross violation of international law. And you don't even have to be a first-year law student to know that is against the sanctity of diplomatic prerogatives. And but we see all this illegal behavior all of the time. I mean, I wouldn't put it past them to do it. And of course, just about everybody from Fox all the way to CNN would probably say, yeah. Because it's necessary, not because it's against international law, because they never talk about international law. If they did, they would be criticizing the government for what it's doing, from George W. Bush, go all the way back to, I don't know, I guess you could go all the way back to Buchanan before Lincoln. I mean, even the Mexican Wars. Okay, I mean, these are all illegal. Okay, they always are, but there's never any focus on it. So this is very, very dangerous development. But
someone like Abrams wants that to happen because it'll get momentum going again for the coup, because the momentum is at a complete standstill. I mean, what is hilarious is that Maduro has an authoritarian state, but he makes sure that there are security forces protecting Guaido, protecting him. The state is protecting him as he moves around in public. The state, Maduro's government, is protecting the physical safety of this random guy. Wrap your head around that.
Alexander, any thoughts? Venezuela?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think what's happened in Venezuela, and it's most extraordinary actually, because of course, as you will remember, Alex, I took a rather pessimistic view at the early stages of the US attempt to overthrow Maduro. But as I said, the way it's turned out is that, of course, it's consolidated Maduro's support in Venezuela, because of course it's confirmed the political narrative that Maduro has been saying, that Venezuela's problems are not created by him. They are created by this war against Venezuela by the United States. Well, the United States has now acted to show that that is true, or at least to show it is true in a way that most Venezuelans, I suspect, now believe it to be true. So it has consolidated support for Maduro amongst large sections of the Venezuelan population. It's rallied support amongst the military behind the legitimate government of Venezuela, which is Maduro's government, because, of course, the thing that soldiers are there to do is to defend the sovereignty of their country if they're trained properly. And that is apparently what they are now doing. So they seem to have been demotivated to move against Maduro even more than they might have been previously. And of course, the other thing it's done is that it's created this very strange situation where the United States has been relying upon Guaido and his middle-class supporters to overthrow Maduro, whereas Guaido and his middle-class supporters have been looking to the United States to do it for them.
Yep.
So that the result is that each of these two groups, Guaido and his middle-class supporters on the one hand, and the United States on the other, are becoming disenchanted, each of them, with their partner. So it has been a most extraordinary situation. And one of the other things that I've sort of started to get a sense of is that because Maduro's government has become consolidated as a result of all of these moves, and support has rallied to it, and because under pressure, he is now listening to advice that he's getting from various people, especially, I suspect, the Chinese and the Russians. The economic situation in Venezuela has actually marginally ticked up. So it's been a most extraordinary situation, a failure in almost every respect. And going back to some of the points that Peter was making about Iran, and how the United States and how the neocons, always there's the worry that when they look at failure of one of their regime change policies, they double down and escalate. One always has to worry now about the risk that something similar might happen with Venezuela. But I think we're quite away from that point of view. In the meantime, as I said, it's all gone from the neocon point of view, horribly wrong. And I don't get a sense that they know very much about what to do.
They never think it through.
No.
And this is still another example. I mean, I have neocons on my program once in a while, the brave ones that'll come on, and I always ask, I said, why do you think it's going to work this time? And then they give you this malarkey, okay? But it's a fair question. Why do you think it's going to work this time? See, this is the difference between being a realist and being a neocons want to recreate the world in the way it should be, the way they want it to be. And we here, we're always talking about the way the world is, okay,
Exactly.
for better or worse, okay, and what works and what doesn't work, okay, and know something about history. I mean, Elliot Abrams is supposed to be the guy to go to, the point guy. He couldn't see this coming, huh? And that's why he created such mischief in the 1980s under Reagan, okay? I mean, mischief is an understatement, of course.
Yeah, but Peter, do you think they really, I mean, do you think they care, neocons, if they get it right, or even neoliberals? I mean, me and Alexandra did the video on Canada and Chrystia Freeland. And okay, she's a neoliberal, neocon. Alexandra sees the same side of two different sides to the same coin there with neoliberals and neocons. But these warmongers, they're never held to account. They're never punished. Quite the opposite. You might have Chrystia Freeland becoming prime minister of Canada, maybe. They get promoted. They're on MSNBC. They're on CNN. They're Elliot Abrams. They're in the White House. They're John Bolton. I mean, they never suffer any consequences. Max Boot.
Absolutely.
All these guys.
Absolutely.
I mean, do they care if they get it right?
I think they care, but there's no downside in being wrong. Okay.
There's no downside.
I mean, yeah, because you had Max Boot that was on Tucker, and Max Boot, says, well, your crystal ball, I can compare my crystal ball to your crystal ball, and Tucker Carlson, the smart guy is, but I'm not a foreign policy advisor. I'm a talk show host. You're supposed to be the expert.
Tucker demolished him, and within a couple of months, he was on MSNBC as a contributor. Alexander, you want to just jump in?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I'm going to make a general observation about the neocons. I've been watching and following them very carefully now for the better part of 20 years. What I think about them is that they almost revel in catastrophic failure, a disaster like Iran, a nightmare like Libya, a nightmare like Syria. The one thing they cannot bear is appearing completely ineffectual. So if nothing happens in Venezuela, if it ticks on along like this, like it's doing at the moment, quietly, even stabilizing, that is something that will make them very angry and which will drive them mad and might very, very well make them want to escalate even further. But to go back to your original question, yes, they do care, as I said, if they look weak and ineffectual, and if the United States looks like it can't achieve its objectives. But do they care if there's a disaster? No, they don't care, because from their point of view, as you correctly said, disasters never have any consequences from them. At least it is a show of power, and it is power that they are very obsessed with.
All right, before we get to some super chats, we're approaching an hour. I've got a question for both of you guys. Very quickly, can you explain if there is a difference, or what is the difference between neoliberal and neocons today as you see it in practical terms? Is there a difference between, say, the neoliberals of Obama and these guys, the Trudeaus, and the neocons, the Max Boots, the Bill Kristols, the John Boltons?
I think neoliberals are simply people are simply neocons who use more left-wing language. In practical terms, I don't see any difference between them at all. If I have to be frank, I find the neoliberals more dangerous and more, well, for me, more antipathetic than the neocons. I mean, a straightforward neocon, I would tend to prefer, frankly. I don't know what Peter thinks.
Well, I tend to focus on different themes when I hear the two different terms. I mean, neoliberal, I think of no borders. I think of postmodernism. I think of a super welfare state. I see a monopolitical culture. When I hear neocon, I think these people just have they don't have any moral foundation. They have a goal, and they'll do anything that's necessary. Anything is necessary to get what they want. Okay, exactly. And it is this projection of power, of being able to do anything, not needing an interlocutor, not giving legitimacy to diplomacy. They abhor diplomacy. They hate treaties. They see, when I think of neocon, I think of unilateralists. Okay. When I think of neoliberals, I see that they believe that they are the new priests and bishops and cardinals and the Pope of this postmodernist, post-Marxist, anti-Western agenda. So, they're puzzle pieces that work together, certainly. Okay. But I tend to focus on very specific terms because, neoliberalism has ideological foundations, as wrong as they are, and a misreading of history. But neocons, it's more about a strategy of power. Okay, because most of the origins of the neocons, they were all Marxists. Okay, I mean, they were. Okay, I mean, and they're very Leninist. Very Leninist in their outlook, okay? Because there's no moral there are no moral categories. That's not where it's founded. It doesn't give it cohesion. All right. The neocons say it's by any means necessary. Okay. Yeah. And it's never about democracy. But of course, we're bringing democracy to Venezuela. See, it's never about that. Okay. It's always being able to the ability to use force with impunity. That's what they like. That's their perfect world.
Yes. Let me just illustrate by example the point that Peter is making. You have, on the one hand, the cynicism of John Bolton, who is a neocon. And on the other hand, you have the ideological and messianic fanaticism of Samantha Power, who is a neoliberal. I mean, that is the difference.
Very good.
All right, that's a perfect example. Perfect.
Yeah. Samantha Power, God. We went from Samantha Power, the neoliberal at the UN, to Nikki Haley, the neocon.
Yeah, well, Samantha Power, they might be fitting her with an orange jumpsuit soon. Let's keep an eye on that one.
That's right.
I have, Samantha, I haven't forgotten. Okay. Why did you have to unmask so many people? And you say you don't remember. You don't remember why.
300.
I think
300 people.
I think that you need to take a little bit of time out of your schedule tomorrow and go talk to a grand jury. Okay. And bring a toothbrush, okay? You might be there for a while.
All right. Okay, guys, we're at about an hour in. Let's get to some questions that people sent us before the program. And let's get to some super chats as well. And guys, smash that like button, share the channel with everybody you know. If you are not subscribed and you're watching, please subscribe and click on the notifications bell. And also go to the Duran shop. Pick up a t-shirt, help support us. And of course, you can always donate to us on PayPal and Patreon. Thank you for your super chats as well. We really, really appreciate those super chats. And you can follow us on Instagram, the Duran_com. We are at about 98 followers on Instagram. So guys, whoever's out there in the chat listening and you have your phone on you, go to Instagram, follow us, help us get to 100. That would be really cool. And we'll really appreciate it.
And if you want,
all right, let's get to some questions.
And if you want, I'll put some big dog pictures on there. Okay, maybe that'll do the trick. Okay?
We try to mix it up. We put pictures from the posts and the articles that we do, and we also put about 20 to 30% of the photos we put are everyday stuff that we're doing, hanging around, going places, wherever we may be. Peter's posted a couple of things from him in the metro. Some music. Alexander has not given us a photo yet, Alexander.
No pressure on you.
Yeah. Send us some pics, Alexander.
I will indeed.
All right, guys. Let's get to it. Let's see. Let's go to some of the questions that people asked before.
Don't say that. It reminds me of Chris Cuomo, okay?
Of Chris Cuomo. Oh, yeah. No, he says, let's go after it.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
He says, let's go after it. Yeah, Chris Cuomo.
Yeah. Wow.
All right. From Catherine, would the Oracle of London kindly provide us with his legal opinion on the charging and sentencing of Russian gun rights activist Maria Butina?
Yeah. I think it's an absolutely shocking case.
Wait. Let me finish on Cuomo because she wrote some more. So just hold on. Is there actual substance to these charges, Alexander? Or is Miss Butina an unlikely victim of Cuomo's investigation into the NRA? I think she means Mario Cuomo.
Yeah, I think she does.
Yeah, as well as the Russophobia currently plaguing the USA political class. Thank you, Catherine, for that question, Alexander.
Very good question. Can I just say, I don't know whether or not she's a victim of Cuomo's investigation. I'm absolutely sure that she is a victim of the anti-Russian hysteria that we are seeing in the United States at the moment. Can I make it absolutely clear? I don't see that Maria Butina has carried out any criminal acts or done anything unlawful at all. She is a young woman, very, very entranced by the United States, very, very entranced with gun rights. She came over perfectly appropriately, in my opinion, to do a postgraduate degree in the United States. Like many people, she is a very, very active networker and successfully networked. There is no evidence that she did anything at the behest of the Russian authorities or the Russian government. There is no evidence that she was in any sense an agent of the Russian government. There is no evidence that she tried to shape US policy or any institution like the NRA on behalf of the Russian government. There is no evidence that she was a spy, which is an allegation that was made and dropped. There is no evidence that she was used sex or all those awful salacious claims in order to get information or to buy influence. That was all absolute nonsense. I think that what has been done to her was outrageous. She was arrested, thrown into prison, charged with this nebulous and unsupported Farah allegation that she was an agent for the Russian government. I don't believe she was, and I think because she found that she was running out of money very fast, she was forced into a guilty plea, which frankly she didn't need to make. But that's the nature of the American criminal justice system now, that unless you are extremely rich, it's very difficult to fight it because you quickly ran out of money. And she's now been sentenced this impossible 18-month sentence for, as I said, a crime which in my opinion she never committed and which would have been disproportionate anyway, even if she had committed it, given that in most cases, the vast majority of cases, it ends up with nothing more than a fine. The only reason Maria Butina has been sent to prison and treated in this way, and to be absolutely clear about it, is because she is Russian. There is no other reason for this. And I'm sorry to say, it is a terrible comment on the political atmosphere at the moment in the United States.
Yeah.
Excellent answer, Alexander. Peter from ASBA. Putin once said, unless North Korea feels saved, it is ready to eat grass and never thinks of abandoning its nuclear program, referring to the continuous sanctions imposed. If he thinks so, and we know that the US can't be trusted, what do you think would be the solution Kim Putin discussed in their meeting? Or was it only to discuss the sanctions and how Russia can help North Korea?
Well, I think that we did a video on this here. I think that the summit between the two leaders was to show the world that North Korea is not isolated. It does have I wouldn't say friends, but it has allies in the region. Russia and China don't want to see a failed state in North Korea at all. I mean, it's again. I remember Lindsey Graham was on the Five, or was a morning program, Fox and Friends, and he even just said, "Well, if there's a war, it won't affect us." I mean, oh God, yeah, I guess that's true. The 30,000 American troops might perish. You know, I'll just reiterate what I said during our video: is that Western media and Western politicians, and I think people surrounding Trump, they only think of disarmament, nuclear disarmament. But really what's in play here is a peace process to end the conflict, the North Korea, South Korea conflict. See, that's the roadmap. And that way you start solving those problems, getting past those obstacles, and then the security arrangement for the entire peninsula, not just one country, both countries, then you discuss that. And I think that's what Kim was trying to convey to Putin, is that this is a very broad and potentially very, very deep process that we're embarking upon here. And maybe if you could, under some circumstances, send out the word is that that's the way we approach this here. Because obviously, if North Korea were to completely disarm itself, it would be attacked, okay, like Libya was. And so, eating grass is much better than being destroyed by the United States. So the perception of this whole process here, the South Koreans get it. They really do get it really well. I say every time we mention President Moon's name, he deserves all of the credit for this, all of the credit for it. I mean, he's a true peacemaker, and he's not going to give up on the process. And the summit, the Putin-Kim summit, shows the process will go on. And the U.S. is not going to dictate the pace of this. If they try, it's going to end in failure. We keep talking about failure, okay? But that's the way. It's because of this unilateralist approach to dealing with international problems.
All right, Alexander, do you want to comment on that, or?
Yes. I get to say this, and it builds on what Peter says, and it also relates back to comments that both Peter and I have made in the past. This confrontational policy the United States is following to the Korean problem is going to end up isolating the United States, because what it's going to do, if it is persisted with, is it's going to make the South Koreans and the North Koreans and the Russians and the Chinese decide that the only way to resolve this problem once and for all is to do a deal with each other that does not involve the United States.
Exactly.
Now, we both, Peter and I, in our videos last week, which we did with you, we analysed the various issues, and we both covered it. I just before the summit, Peter just after. We went into a lot of the detail, but the overall strategic picture is that one. The North Koreans and the South Koreans are talking to the Russians and the Chinese. The North Koreans and the South Koreans are talking to each other. The North Koreans, the South Koreans, the Russians and the Chinese already have an emerging consensus as to what is the proper way forward. They are already agreed about the roadmap. They may not be agreed about the detail, and that's things that they're, Kim and Putin and Kim and Xi and Moon and Putin and all these people, they talk about all the time, but they can already see the ultimate destination. If the United States stops or tries to stop the North Koreans and the South Koreans and the Chinese and the Russians arriving at that destination in a conflict which is of existential importance to the Korean people. I mean, if there is a war on the Korean peninsula, going back to what Lindsey Graham said, which Peter quoted, it will be the Korean people whose existence will be in jeopardy, first and foremost. Then at some point, the Korean people will say, we cannot let the survival of our nation be held hostage to the political games of the United States. We have potential security guarantees from the Chinese and the Russians, and we will forge ahead with those. And the United States will be left out. Now, the very fact that the North Koreans and the South Koreans began this process by talking to each other should have been a warning to the United States that that might happen. They've not really heeded that warning. Unless US policy changes, I predict that soon, and not before very long, we will start to see all of these four countries talking to each other more and more, and no longer paying very much attention to what the United States says.
Very well said. Extremely well said.
All right. Yes, guys, we are going to get to the Spanish elections. Thank you, Alexander, by the way. That was, I agree, very well said, as always. All right, let's get to some more super chats, and then we'll talk about Spain and their elections a bit. Let's see. We have Penguins fan, $2 Canadian super chat. Uncle Joe, keep your children away from him. Thank you for that super chat. Caliban. Super chat. Clown World version 2019. Yeah, with 3 clown emoticons. Yep. Honk, honk, honk. Thank you for that super chat. Paul Cardin. Trump's hearts with the New Yorkers. Refugees fleeing now. All right. Thank you, Paul, for your super chat as well. Let's see here. From, we answered that already. From Mark. From Chosi, Alexander, there are 2 ongoing court cases saying that May's Brexit extension was illegal and the UK left the EU on March 29th. Can these cases succeed, and why are MSM ignoring this?
The reason they're ignoring this is because quite likely Theresa May did, in fact, if not break the law, at least she went beyond what the law says. I don't think they will succeed, and I will explain why. What Theresa May is arguing, and it's a very sophistical argument, but I think it's one that the courts will ultimately accept, is that her agreement with the EU was ultimately some kind of an international agreement, an international law, Trump's domestic law, on a question of this kind. Moreover, there was a vote in the House of Commons to extend the time frame, and she will almost certainly be able to rely on that also. So I don't think we should place too much reliance upon the outcome of these court cases. But the lawyers who are arguing these court cases are extremely formidable and very clever lawyers indeed. They understand the legal issues extremely well. The very fact that we're even talking about these subjects shows how bad the situation is. And I think that it also shows the extent to which, as a result of Theresa May's actions and misactions, the constitutional system of Britain is in effect breaking down. So I'm afraid don't put too much faith in these court cases, but do see them as a symptom of how bad the situation has become.
Okay, thank you, Alexander. And let's see, Peter. All right, this one is, all right, Peter, get ready. We may need a good 3 hours for this one, but thank you, David, for your super chat. It's a good question. Can you document the 20-year transition from the 90s Clintons being the hillbilly invaders of DC to becoming the masters of the deep state? And
Wow.
also thank you for your super chat as well. No comment as well. But Peter, from David, that is a big one, but we'll give you 5 minutes.
What happened is that I think, it's for all of our international viewers, you can really look at Bill Clinton and Tony Blair of being very part of a very similar phenomenon. Bill Clinton essentially ended the New Deal in the United States. I mean, if you look at every single Democrat that followed Franklin Roosevelt, they were New Dealers. They weren't often called that, but I mean, that was essentially what they were, and their view of the welfare state. And Bill Clinton wanted, for electoral reasons and how the economy was evolving and changing, and we didn't really use the term globalization much back then, but globalization was really kicking in, and they were enamored by it a lot. And you had you had these shifts going on where, the government ended up just underwriting financial expansion of Western capital around the world, and Tony Blair was doing it simultaneously. So they both believed in the radical center, which is kind of whimsical thing to talk about. I'm not really never understood what that really means, but Tony Blair basically broke the back of labor, where what was it, cool Britannia and all of that nonsense. I would like Alexander McKeers. I was pretty skeptical. I mean, this guy looked like a used car salesman to me, but that's what he was in the end. But worse, a war criminal. So it's this realigning of the pillars of establishment politics. Tony Blair did it with labor, and Bill Clinton did it with the Democrats. Look, I mean, Democrats always were protecting the working class, and Bill Clinton gave up on them. Okay, I mean, we talk about it all the time about how Trump was able to tap into this forgotten group of people, but they started being forgotten by Bill Clinton, and Bill Clinton's presidency essentially preordained someone like Donald Trump becoming president, and I think also is that. The same thing that's happening in Britain. I mean, Jeremy Corbyn is in a way, I'm not saying he is destined to lead, but someone like him may be destined to lead. And it goes all the way back to the policies of Clinton and Blair, and their ghosts are with us to this day. They're both alive, okay, but they have empty souls.
Alex, you want to comment on that?
Yes,
Blair part?
I can't speak so much about the Clintons because obviously I'm based in Britain, but I suspect that, as Peter says, there are some similarities with Blair. I mean, Blair did two things when he became Prime Minister. Firstly, he forged very quickly a very intense and very close relationship with the intelligence services. This has been well documented, and in a sense, it was him telling the intelligence services that the Labour Party, which had always been somewhat critical of the intelligence services, is now on your side, and the intelligence services are reciprocating and becoming very enthusiastic about a prime minister who seemed to be so much on their side. I think it's worth pointing out that, contrary to what many people think, both in Britain and in the United States, the people who tend to go into the foreign part of intelligence, MI6 and the CIA, tend to come from liberal backgrounds. Yeah. Christopher Steele, for example, was a member of the Labour Party, I believe, when he was studying in Cambridge. So, you know, there was always that affinity there. I mean, the FBI and MI5 have always tended to be more conservative, but MI6 and the CIA have always tended to be a little bit more liberal. So anyway, there was that connection. But the other great skill that Clinton and Blair had is that, firstly, by moving their respective parties, certainly in Britain, very much to the right and to the centre, they attracted into the party an awful lot of money, and that brought them an awful lot of influence within their parties. And of course, they also established this reputation as these surefire election winners, which consolidated their position within their parties. So you have this curious link. On the one hand, a connection that was forged then between, you know, the Clintons and the Blairs and the intelligence services of their respective countries. And the second, the entrenching within the Democratic and the Labour parties of very large-scale influence based on donors and very careful selection of candidates to make sure that they reflect the wishes of those donors and ultimately of the Clintons and the Blairs. So they created this nexus, which has never really been broken. And in the United States, it is extremely powerful. I mean, they still run the Democratic Party. In Britain, Corbyn has to some extent managed to challenge it, but it's still nowhere near like the Labour Party that I remember.
The interesting thing, too, is that both of them oversaw the deregulation of finance, which I think is really, really important. And that's when you see these where, you know, now we talk about the 1%. I mean, the 1%, that's where that whole genesis started. When you started deregulating the financial markets, that's what gave us the financial crisis of 2008. Okay. Yes. And it happened both in the UK and in the United States. And when you have this complete basically you had capital finance out of control. Okay, yes. and Barack Obama, when he had to deal with the financial crisis after he was elected, I mean, it was their influence and power was so overwhelming. It couldn't even be challenged, and that is the legacy of what we got from Blair and from Clinton. And I do like the observation about in the intelligence community, because that's very, very important, how that evolved and how they became they essentially were given a front row seat, which before was not the case.
Absolutely.
Okay. Let's get to a super chat. Thank you, John, for that super chat, by the way. David, for that super chat, by the way. And now we have a super chat from John. Alexander, at the 2019 BRI forum, both Xi and Putin sound like globalists, frequently using the word cooperation. Are they planning to isolate the US?
I think that what the Chinese and the Russians have concluded is that they don't want to isolate the United States, but they want to distance themselves from the United States. China lacks natural resources, and for China, Russia provides the essential back. It's the place where there is, it protects China's rear, and it provides China with all the oil, the gas, the raw materials, the grain, the steel, the metals, all of those things which China needs and which it would otherwise have to import through places like the South China Sea and the East China Sea, where the US has been crazily talking about establishing blockades. For the Russians, it links the alliance, well, the relationship with China links Russia to the great rising economic power that is now challenging the United States for world economic leadership. So it is natural, it is a natural partnership between these two countries. And because it is such a natural partnership, and because these two countries are each in their own way so big and so powerful, it is acting as a magnet of attraction to all sorts of other countries that have also got various reasons to be wary and concerned about the actions of the United States. Peter was talking earlier about Iran, about Turkey. Of course, there's probably, we're going to see changes in Afghanistan also, and even further afield, even in places where the United States has historically been dominant, places like Europe. We see, you know, countries like Italy now signing up to the BRI. And so I don't think Xi and Putin think of themselves as globalists. I don't think they see themselves as in any way setting out to dethrone the United States, but by the precautionary steps they're taking together with each other, they are creating a new alternative world which might ultimately achieve precisely that. But it is the United States that it is driving this process by forcing or pushing all these various countries together with each other and obliging them to cooperate with each other in this way.
Yeah, the whole China-Russia relationship is basically based on the fact that let the U.S. isolate itself, okay? Exactly. Because it's doing it all by itself here. Plus, just one little extra thing to add on what Alexander Mikira said is that people always say, well, does Russia just want to be a natural resource supplier to China? No, what the deal is, everything that Alexander Mikira said is correct, but the deal is, what do the Chinese give? What they do is infrastructure, lots of infrastructure, which they will be partner with Russia, because the so much of Russia is untouched, believe it or not, in 2019. It's so much of it is untouched. I mean, I took a flight from Moscow to Vladivostok. You're in the plane going over the same country for 10 hours. Yeah. The same country.
I've done it too.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? Yeah, and there's so many resources there, and the Chinese they want to be part of that I don't want to say exploration and development. Okay.
Yes.
And it's they make very, very good partners, and because I'm really surprised by the question, are they globalists? Because they're intensely defending their sovereignty.
Exactly.
That's what they're all about. Exactly. I mean, I've talked to Chinese colleagues, it's CGTN, and they really like the idea of an alliance. And I never used the word alliance because it's not an alliance, because Russia, and actually technically China, they do not have alliances. I keep stressing that the commonality with Russia and China is that they prize above all their sovereignty, and that's something that's not going to go away.
Okay, another super chat from John Huber. What about the anti-Semitic New York Times cartoon?
Yeah. Well, you know,
I don't know that story. I don't know if you guys heard.
I've heard about it, but I haven't seen the cartoon.
I've seen it. Look, you know, it's whatever is in the eye of the beholder. Okay, I mean, what it did was neither Netanyahu, neither Donald Trump were portrayed in a stereotypical way that one would instantly say that is anti-Semitic. And I think everyone that's listening to this knows exactly what I'm talking about. I know when I see an anti-Semitic meme right away, I know what it is because it's intentional, right? But that editorial cartoon did not make me. I saw and I did not see that it was anti-Semitic whatsoever. What it was is that it was Israel basically as a dog and Donald Trump being pulled along by it. Okay, I think that's a pretty fair way of talking about the U.S.-Israel relationship. I don't think that's controversial. Okay, I mean, go to AIPAC; they're proud of it. Okay, they say it publicly. But Netanyahu talks about it all the time. It's not a secret. The betrayal, in my mind, like I said, it's in the eye of the beholder. I didn't see any anti-Semitism in it, but any criticism of Israel is automatically called anti-Semitic. That's the kind of, you know, Manichaean world that we live in now. Being critical of Israel does not in any way, shape, or form mean you're anti-Semitic. It's just, I'm not afraid to say the obvious. Okay, that's true. That there isn't a connection.
All right, Peter. I'll follow up onto the North Korea question. A super chat from the Rocket Man. Will Putin eventually do a similar summit as he did in North Korea in Syria with Assad, Rouhani, and Erdogan? I mean, he's done similar summits. Do you expect another one coming?
Oh, well, I think these four are ongoing. It's a trend. I mean, we've seen. It's okay, Alex. The dogs will be dogs. Everybody knows that. No, I wouldn't be surprised at one point where, you know, they want to make a big public deal. I mean, the interesting thing is with the Iranians and the Syrians and the Russians and the Turks to a great degree, they're very public about how they're working together and very proud of it, and not worried to admit that they don't always agree on every point. But you know, Russia and Iran has Damascus back, okay, and that's something that's going to stay. So yeah, we could see something like that soon. Sure.
Okay, Alexander from Chosy, a super chat. What happened to Assange and the Skripals?
Well, what's happening to Assange is that he's in Belmarsh prison, one of the most extraordinarily tough secure prisons in Britain, apparently being denied access to his lawyers, which I find extremely worrying. Now, at the moment, there is supposed to be an extradition process underway. The government hasn't yet made a decision whether or not they're going to extradite him to the United States. We're all expecting that that's what they're going to do. As soon as that happens, his lawyers are going to challenge it in probably the magistrates' court. There's going to be speeches about this. There's a meeting lined up very soon in, I believe, Bloomsbury, where people who support Assange are going. I'll be one of them. And there's going to be a protest outside the High Court soon to support him. But I mean, his position is very bad. I mean, the government is saying that his medical condition isn't so serious. Well, we all saw the pictures of him and how he looked when he was taken out of the Ecuadorian embassy. And as I said, he's been kept in a very isolated condition in this very, very tough prison. As for the Skripals, well, what can I say? I mean, they have vanished to all intents and purposes.
And I think Jerry Atalo is asking about the Duckgate, the video that we did there. So can you tie that in a little bit if there's been any progress on the whole Duckgate thing?
The interesting thing about the Duckgate is that, of course, it in a sense points to the vacuum of information that we now have, because the British government hasn't really commented on that extraordinary story. To those who don't know what it is, Gina Haspel, who is the director of the CIA, apparently persuaded a very unwilling Donald Trump to expel 60 Russian diplomats on the grounds that she had photographs, which she showed him, of children who had been poisoned by Novichok in Salisbury, where the Skripal attack took place, and dead ducks, which were also poisoned in Salisbury. when the attack on the Skripals allegedly took place. The problem is that the British authorities have confirmed that there were no children poisoned by Novichok or hospitalized, and there don't seem to have been any dead ducks either. So that whole story that Gina Haspel sold to Donald Trump looks to have been a complete invention. The only question, which I don't know the answer to, is an invention by whom? By Gina Haspel and the CIA, or by the British, or by all three of them? I don't know the answer to that question. But
maybe Elliot Abrams was just a little. He was a little bored with Venezuela.
Exactly.
It sounds like that's his wheelhouse. That's the kind of stuff he would do. Okay?
Exactly. But the big question is, as I said, what actually has happened to these people? What is the state of the investigation? I don't know that anybody knows the answers to these questions. And frankly, I find that extremely disturbing. That's the most worrying thing of all.
And that's why we need Julian Assange.
Why are the Skripals not being made available to answer proper questions by the media, not just the British media, not just these extremely controlled questions that they've got with the very controlled answers, but proper questions. Why are they not being able, apparently, to communicate properly with their families? Why is Sergei Skripal's mother unable to speak to her son? I don't have the answers to these questions. I mean, I can afloat guesses, which, by the way, I'm not going to do, because I said there is supposed to be an investigation underway, and I don't think there's enough evidence to really float responsible guesses. But I mean, the very fact that these people have vanished out of sight and increasingly out of mind is extremely concerning. And can I say, if something like that ever happened in China or in Russia, the media would be full of it. A couple of weeks ago, there was all sorts of concerns about a Chinese official who had been briefly an official for the Interpol. And he went back to China and he disappeared. And there were lots of stories about him and lots of concerns expressed about him. And then the Chinese came forward and they said that he's under criminal investigation because he supposedly took bribes. But I remember how concerned people were about him. But there is no concern about the Skripals, both of whom are supposed to be victims. And I just find that very worrying indeed. And it does make me ask again, what has happened to Britain when things like this happen? I mean, Britain did not used to be the sort of country where people just disappeared.
Yeah. And that's why we need someone like Julian Assange, because journalists will not do their job. Okay, Luke Harding, where are the Skripals? Are you interested? Is anybody at The Guardian interested?
Well,
really? No?
No.
Oh, but you could spend 2 years on a hoax, but you won't even do basic investigative journalists for the public interest.
Exactly. Very well said, Peter.
Very well said, Peter. Super chat from Legion Trooper. Now that Trump's staff is neocon, is Tulsi the real anti-war candidate?
You know, I'm really glad that you asked that question. I saw her interviewed on the Young Turks. I don't watch the Young Turks, but it was suggested by YouTube, and so I clicked on it. And you know what? She's very presidential. She's very confident, speaks with authority, isn't cowed so easily like all these other clowns they all are. She knows what she's talking about, and she corrects people. And if it's a bad question, she'll say, it's not a good question. A better question would be, that's pretty amazing to see someone talk that way right now. She's a problematic candidate for me. I'm a conservative. She's not, okay? But her views on military interventions, on foreign wars, on the neocons, I agree with her completely. And I actually have I usually don't have this. I don't usually have an emotional reaction to politicians, because I know that they're all trying to sell you a bill of goods. Okay, that's their job. Okay, it's fine. But I felt a sense of integrity from her, which is refreshing, because it's very, very rare these days. Okay, very rare. So all I can do is answer is I'm going to keep watching her very carefully. But the Democrats are going to deplatform her. They just can't. They can't handle the cold turkey that she wants to talk about, and she imminently is knowledgeable of what she's talking about. You can't easily dismiss her. So the only way you do is just have her disappear. Well, just, we already talked about the Skripals. They just want to disappear her because she's so annoying, and she talks truth to power. And again, all these other clowns, they're just so afraid. I mean, this, what's his name? Beto? I never could get that guy, or Rourke, whatever. I mean, he's ashamed to be a white man. Well, what is that all about? Why does anybody talk about being ashamed of their skin color or their gender? It's just what God gave them. Okay, and you deal with it, but don't grovel in front of low octane thinkers and propagandists to achieve political points. Tulsi doesn't do that. That's a real juxtaposition.
Alexander, let's jump into Spain. The elections yesterday. What do you make of them?
Well, I haven't
results.
been able. Yeah, I mean, it seems to me that we're now seeing increasingly the trend, not just in Europe, but not just in Northern Europe, not just in Eastern Europe, but all over the place now. We're beginning to see the emergence of the growing emergence of dissatisfaction with the centrist position in that the EU, that the globalist position is following. And I think this is a breakthrough, because Spain, for those who don't know, is the most pro-EU of all
Exactly.
countries.
Exactly.
At least that's always been my opinion. So the fact that there is a rebellion now starting to emerge there, well, we shall see where it all goes.
Yeah, but I mean, they all, just to add just a few points here. What it is showing is that this very traditional, I think, going back to since the Second World War, where coalition building, it's hit a brick wall all across Europe right now, because basically you're getting hung parliaments left and right, where there is no political position or group of people that can actually to bring consensus. Okay, and the whole post-war consensus building process is short-circuited now. It's not moving forward, and it's going to. What it's going to do? What is it doing? It is showing people that they can't believe the political system that they've been told is the best that they couldn't hope for. No, what is happening now is people are really beginning to rethink this whole what is it? This generated consensus. This is what it's fabricated consensus, and the media tells you that all the time. And people are just saying, and you could just throw in the yellow vest here. When they look at that idiot in the presidential palace with his gilded desk, and all that, they're saying, this is not the France that I live in. This is not my country. They're telling me it is all the time. It's not, okay? And I think the way that Alexander McCarris started out, Spain is the most pro-EU country, remarkably so. And I think it has to do with its experience with Franco and fascism.
Absolutely.
I think that's a tight connection here. But the fact that the Spaniards now are beginning to say it just ain't working anymore. And that's where we stand right now. I think it's very representative of what's going on in Europe in general.
I mean, can I just explain one thing about Spain? I mean, the dominant party in Spain since the early 1980s has been the Socialist Party. Now, I mean, it increased its share of the votes, but not, I mean, it certainly didn't win a landslide or do particularly well. The big change in Spain is that the Vox Party has increased to 10% of the vote. Now that
from 0.2%.
Exactly. I mean, that is extraordinary. That is a remarkable breakthrough. and it's winning in places like Andalusia, which was just, not expected. I mean, Andalusia was a stronghold of the Socialist Party before. So, I mean, the advance of Vox is remarkable. And what you're seeing in Spain is that the sort of centrist right party, the party of Rajoy, former Prime Minister Rajoy, I think it's called the People's Party. I can't remember its name exactly, but it used to be this sort of counterbalance to the socialists, and it's the sort of party that is very close in many ways to Angela Merkel's CDU, CSU. It's part of that family. It has crashed. So yes, the socialists, perhaps they improved marginally, but the overall trend in Spain is now becoming very clear. And we're starting to see, as I said, a dramatic rise in parties like Vox across Europe, as people become increasingly angry with the situation in their countries. And Peter's absolutely right, by the way, when he attributed all this to the shadow of the long years of Franco. It's been very, very difficult for people in Spain 10 years ago to vote for a party like Vox.
That's right.
Even 5 years ago, it would have been inconceivable. The fact that they are voting for Vox, a tenth of Spaniards who voted for Vox, and what I believe was an increased turnout in this election, really says a great deal about the sense of where Spain is going.
I want to be very clear with everyone here. I am not equating Vox with Franco. Okay, I'm not making that connection here. All right.
No.
All right, so let's be very clear about that.
You don't have to be, okay, you don't have to be anything to the right in Spain is almost inevitably going to be tarred with the Francoist brush.
And that's why I mentioned this caveat here, okay? Because somebody's going to go, off the handle and make some kind of claim that we are not making in this podcast.
No, we're not making it. No, the Vox is not a threat to Spanish democracy. I mean, that's something one wants to make very, very clear about this. But it is a nationalist, patriotic party.
Yes,
I'm sure, by the way, that the events in Catalonia last year had a role to play in all of this, galvanizing patriotic Spanish voters to vote for Vox. But Vox is not a threat to Spanish democracy in the way that the fascist parties that once supported Franco used to be. So let's be very clear about this. But it has not always been easy in Spain to be a straightforwardly right-wing, conservative, patriotic Spaniard. Right. That has been a difficult position to take.
But that's why I'm saying that the post-war consensus building is coming to an end, because it doesn't work for the average person, and that's why we have the alternative voices in parties like in Germany, because that was always a red line. I mean, you can't be a conservative because of the haunting past. Well, that has come to an end. That has come to an end in Europe, where people are saying, no, I am not going to be tarred by your slurs because of past history. We have a new reality right now, and your consensus, post-war consensus, is not working. That's their message.
Indeed. I mean, the other great problem is that, of course, it's becoming increasingly unclear who is going to govern Spain, because the socialists and their ally Podemos, and I think Podemos, by the way, if the Socialist Party in Spain is rather like the PASOK party in Greece, in fact, they were very close at one time, but as the mainstream socialist left-wing party, and as I say, the dominant party in Spain. Podemos was the Greek Syriza, and it has bombed. I mean, at one time it looked as if it would do really well, but it has done very badly, and it is now straightforwardly become an ally of the Socialist Party. But even those two parties together, the Socialists and Podemos, don't have a majority in the Spanish Parliament, the Cortes. So it is not clear how they're going to govern, because without the Socialists and Podemos, it's difficult to create a coalition. And at the same time, the socialists and Podemos are refusing to go into coalition, even with the centre-right parties like Ciudadanos, the other centre-right party, which is, by the way, also, by Spanish standards, pretty conservative. So it looks as if we're also going to have a period of very weak, very disorganized government in Spain. But the trend, as I said, is clear. And I predict that come the next election in Spain, we will see further polarization. We will see perhaps more votes going to the socialists, but also we will start to see the new right-wing parties like Vox growing in strength even more. So interesting times in Spain, and a clear sign, another clear sign that this European integrationist policies, this front is cracking, and it's cracked at what would have once been considered its hardest place.
All right, I think, did we lose Peter? I think.
No. Hang on. I'm here. Hang on. I'm here. Hang on. I just lost my screen. Sorry.
Can you hear us though, Peter?
I can. Yeah, I'm going to get back into.
We can hear you. We can hear you. We can hear you.
No, what I did was I just hit. Somebody sent me a message. Okay. Here we go. I'm back.
Well done.
All right.
Oops.
Okay, so
sorry.
No worries. Okay, so Peter, you mentioned. Let's go on for like another 10, 15 more minutes. We're about at 2 hours almost.
About 10.
So let's do a couple more. Let's do a couple more questions and wrap it up. Peter, you mentioned France as you were talking about Spain. The yellow vest is not stopping. And Macron said that he is willing to give some concessions to the yellow vest, but their demands are pretty simple, I think, which is Macron, leave. You have to go. Do you think this is going to carry over to the summer?
Oh, absolutely. And that's why, okay, Macron is not going to go, but that doesn't mean the demand for him to go is going to go away. And this is the deadlock that we're going to see in France. It is in deadlock. And there's going to be no real movement. For the yellow vests, they'll say, well, we're still here. And that's their victory. We're still here. Okay? And Macron and his government have used very, very violent means, tried to slur these people, try to destroy their reputations, tar them with the worst political slurs that you can imagine. And they're still there. They're still there. And that the fact that they are still with us means they're going to stay with us. We have, and I say this every time we talk about it, they have gone up to, but not to exactly institutionalizing themselves. It's not a political party. It's not a union. I keep advising them, don't go any further. Keep it the way it is. And that keeps the government off guard, okay? Because once it crystallizes, formalizes into something, then you have a means to attack it. Don't give the government any favors. Don't do what they want. Keep doing what you're doing. And you're going to get even more powerful because people have a sense of solidarity, not through organization, but through their actions. That is the key to success.
Alexander, you want to comment on the yellow vests and what's going on?
Well, I think we've been proved right because, of course, I can remember us being asked on previous programs about whether the yellow vests were dying or whether it was fading out. And we always said it wasn't. And here we are. And not only have they not died, and as Peter says, that is a big victory in itself, but Macron is talking about making more concessions to them. Now, he wouldn't be making or offering to make concessions, even if those concessions are not in any way meaningful, if he didn't feel under genuine pressure from them. That's right. So, the yellow vest thing, exactly as we predicted, so far from going away, is actually getting stronger. And this despite the fact that there has been a great deal of repression against them in Paris. As I think I mentioned on an earlier program, my wife was in Paris a few weeks ago, meeting various people in the academic world who are people who are, by the way, not predisposed to like or support the yellow vests. And they were all saying the same thing, which is that the behavior of the police and of the authorities has been simply appalling, and that most of the violence is actually coming from that side. And that was what she was hearing. So despite all that repression, despite all these smears, despite the attempt to create a media blockade and an information blockade around this movement, it is still there, it is still gaining traction, it still has support, and Macron is being forced to make concessions to it. And those concessions will be seen, even as I said, even if they're not meaningful, they will be seen by many of the people who are angry with the state of France as a sign that Macron is getting weaker and that he's starting to feel again that he is under pressure. This huge show of strength that Macron tried to put on over the winter with this bogus consultation exercise that he pretended to go through, and all these very all these laws he passed through the parliament, and all these threats of action and all these things. None of that has worked, and he's back now. Back now to talking about concessions, and we're now moving towards what is the usual hot season for protests in France. We're into May, and of course in May 1968 there were big protests in France. And if we go a little further, in June and July, that was when the French Revolution happened in 1789. And it's also, I think you will find in other times in French history, it's also the time of maximum protests in France. So the yellow vests are still there. They're getting stronger. Macron is getting more nervous and he's getting weaker.
Yes, as I've been told by some of my French friends that he's being called the PowerPoint president, because that's all he has, a little, with his little pen with the little light, and this is how we're going to solve all the problems. Well, no, that's, where's the real pressure coming from? It's not coming from the yellow vests. It's coming from the people that created Macron in the first place. They want results. That's why they put him there. Yeah. That's what he's getting nervous about. Do you think he cares about the people? No, not at all. There's nothing he's said or done that shows he even cares about French culture, French civilization, French history. Okay? And the litmus test is going to be when they start deciding how they're going to rebuild Notre Dame. Then we're going to see what these globalists think. They want to turn it into a shopping mall. That's what they're going to do. Turn it into a shopping mall. And all these guys that came out with their condolences, did any of them say Catholic or Christian? No. They don't use those terms. It's like Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama. What was it? Easter, what was it?
Easter worshippers.
Easter worshippers. Says everything. Says everything to me. Everything.
Okay, let's do a couple more questions and we'll wrap it up. Guys, did you hear this story? This story was sent to me on Facebook. A beluga whale with a harness was found off the coast of Norway. And the harness had, in English, written "Equipment of St. Petersburg" on it. And this is like going all over the place. Is this just another bad setup, or could it really be they're calling it a spy whale? Either a spy whale that Russia's hunting whales. I mean, it's just a weird story, but it's making the rounds. Yeah, it's making the rounds.
Yes, I mean, that doesn't make any kind of sense to me at all. Now, I mean, I haven't heard this story.
Vault 7.
Exactly. But I mean, if somebody can't even write something in Russian, then I mean, it really doesn't make any sort of sense.
Hillary Clinton tried with the Russian recent, and she messed that one up big time. All right, let's do the
weird story.
Yeah, it's a weird story, but it was getting sent all over the place on Facebook, and it got into my my inbox as well. So, and it was asked by a user just now before the program. So let's do one more. This one's a good one. Twitter, Alexander Peter. Do you guys know of Sargon of Akkad, the YouTuber?
Yeah.
He's running for UKIP. He's running for the European Parliament for UKIP. Right. And he's good. He has really good videos. I like him a lot, actually. And Tommy Robinson, both of their campaign pages were taken down by Twitter. What do you guys make of that? I think Tommy's also running for UKIP, right, Alexander?
Yes, yes, he is. I mean, well, he's technically running as an independent, but I mean, he's been backed by UKIP. I think it's a
election meddling in the UK.
Well, indeed, absolutely. But of course, it's going to work in Tommy Robinson's advantage because it'll enable him once again to say the establishment is out to get him. I'm on your side. The establishment is against me. And that means that since you are not part of the establishment, you should vote for me. And that's what an awful lot of working class people are going to do because they are very, very angry with the establishment, and for good cause, because the way in which the establishment has behaved over the last 3 years since the 2016 referendum has been a disaster. And it's not just Tommy Robinson who's going to do well, but by all accounts, a Brexit party and UKIP candidates are
yes, our guy is Carl Benjamin, by the way. Carl Benjamin,
yes, exactly.
Running UKIP, yeah.
They're going to sweep the board, not just in the European elections, which are coming, but I'm getting reports now, I'm seeing reports in the newspapers that the Conservatives are expecting to do extremely badly in the local elections, which happened in Britain on Thursday. And that's going to be a massive blow for the Conservative Party, because political parties in Britain need lots of councillors in local councils to help them bring out the vote in general elections. So political parties that lose local authorities tend to lose general elections because they don't have the people on the ground, the grassroots people, to bring out the votes. So it's going to be a massive blow for them. And using Twitter to ban comments about people, to try and suppress news about it, it's just going to make it be even more people know about it. It's going to create another story.
It's so Soviet.
Tommy Robinson and Mr. Sargon of Akkad, whom I never heard of before, by the way, but that's neither here nor there. They're going to play for this. I mean, it's so counterproductive. It's just, I just shake my head with disbelief.
He's got a big platform on YouTube, close to 1 million subscribers. So,
well, there you go. So, as I said, you're going to ban a person like that from Twitter? I mean, let's not try and ban his campaign from Twitter.
They got rid of John Kiriakou, a whistleblower.
Well, okay, but I mean, if John Kiriakou, who is an admirable and wonderful man, an extraordinary man. He is not standing for election in a time of crisis, and I mean this is not the way. First of all, let's be clear about this. It is not the democratic way.
Yeah, they're banning them. Yeah. They're banning their campaign pages.
Yeah,
and I'm not sure if these are official or not official. I don't know. So maybe someone in the chat, but they're banning campaign pages on a major media platform.
Well, I mean, I don't think it makes any difference whether they're official or not. I mean, the fact is they are interfering, as you correctly said, they're meddling in an election campaign. They're interfering in an election campaign. It is profoundly anti-democratic. It is profoundly wrong, and it is also stupid politically. It is only going to work to the advantage of Tommy Robinson, and as I said, Mr. Sargon of Akkad, whoever he is, and however good he is. And I predict that these people are going to win. I mean, Tommy Robinson has won every single trick over the last year. And one of the reasons he's consistently winning is because the establishment, the British establishment, puts him in that situation where he is going to win. He can extract the maximum sympathy from British working class voters who he knows how to talk to, and he knows how to, he talks their language. They hear him. Many of them might not agree with him, but they're so angry at the moment that all this is going to make them even more inclined to vote for him.
Yeah. Hapless people, hapless. They don't think it through.
No, they don't think it. They don't think it through. As I said, they just don't think it through. I mean, if they want Tommy Robinson to lose, they should leave it to Nigel Farage. what they're doing is helping Tommy Robinson. They're going to help him win.
All right, guys, let's wrap it up there. Thank you for joining us on this live, everyone in the chat. Thank you for your super chats as well. Peter, what are you looking at in the week ahead?
As I relax,
Yeah. No, you're going to be reading the news, that's for sure.
Yeah, just it's in my DNA. I get up around 5 o'clock in the morning. I take my dogs out. By 8 o'clock, I'm across the street in the cafe, and I sit there from 8 o'clock to 12 o'clock reading the news and messaging you very often in the morning what I'm reading and what I'm thinking. So nothing changes. I like to work. I love to work. I was made to work, so I'll be doing that.
All right, Alexander, what are you looking at in the weekend?
Well, I'll tell you, I mean, the overarching crisis is the one we started the program with, and which Peter has been talking about so much, which is the crisis in the relationship between the United States and Iran and this huge blockade. And we've got to now see what is going to happen to the oil price over the next couple of weeks, and not just days, but weeks, and how the United States is going to react and what's going to happen there. This is a very, very big crisis indeed. Peter has said it's the biggest crisis in the world at the moment. He is right. I have no doubt about this at all. And if you want to see things going really badly wrong, that is the crisis that threatens it. Now, there are other things closer to home. One is, of course, there's now what I suspect is going to be before very long, Clinton Gate, Mueller Gate. I don't know what to call it, but
FBI Gate.
FBI Gate. We're going to see how far Trump and Barr take the counteroffensive, which really needs to be waged, both for political reasons, for reasons of political self-interest, but also in order to rescue the constitutional system of the United States. So we're going to have to follow that and follow that very closely. And for me, there is the festering crisis back home. We're no longer talking about Brexit so much because fortunately that awful issue has now become marginalized a little. But we have the
unfortunately, because the UK should be out.
Well, indeed, but I mean, we're now looking at the meltdown of the Conservative Party and what it's going to do about that. Nothing very much for the moment, I must say, but we'll see what they do. And of course, there's also problems within the Labour Party also over all of this. And of course, last but not least, and as I said, I have a personal issue in this. As I said, I'm going to be speaking at a public event about Julian Assange, an issue that I personally care very much about. I think, as Peter again rightly said, all journalists should care about it, because this is an attack on real journalism, not the kind that you find amongst the stenographers that you read in the New York Times and elsewhere, but real journalists. For them, this is an issue of existential importance.
Wow, that was almost like an address. That was cool.
All right, thank you, Alexander, for wrapping it up. Guys, thank you very much for joining us on this Live 36. We hope you have a good Monday and a good week wherever you are in the world. Take care.